Oh man, I wonder which one tastes better, dog water or hot dog water? All right, I want to talk about Pokemon because these two Pokemon games, specifically Pokemon Legends Arceus and Pokemon Legends ZA, are currently the only two games in the Pokemon Legends subseries. Pokemon, considers these mainline. Obviously, they are a different take on mainline Pokemon games. They both veer off of the traditional Pokemon RPGs that we're used to. And so today I just kind of want to compare these two, throw them in a little versus match, and kind of decide which one is better. I think there's 5 categories I want to go through with these games. I want to talk about the gameplay of both of these games. I want to talk about the style of both of these games. So, the aesthetic, the worlds they take place in. I want to talk about their performance, how they run on these consoles. I want to talk about the gimmicks that both these games use. And I also want to talk about the legacy. What is the legacy of both of these games in the Pokemon franchise? Also, with this, I'm not going to be counting the Mega Dimension DLC for Pokemon Legends ZA for a couple reasons. One, it's a $30 DLC, and I'm not buying that DLC because from everything I've looked into about it, it doesn't seem worth it. And two, it just adds a little more post-game content. I really just want to focus on the bread and butter of each of these games, the main stuff that is included. Because if I'm looking at a brand new copy of Pokemon Legends ZA for the Switch 2 at $70, and I add a $30 DLC, I'm comparing a $60 game to a $100 game. Those are two totally different value propositions there. So I'm just going base Pokemon Legends Arceus versus base Pokemon Legends ZA. So if we're talking gameplay, both these games play not only pretty different from traditional Pokemon games, but also pretty different from each other. So Pokemon Legends Arceus came out first. This was an interesting release. It came out in January 2022. When this game was being developed, it was a pretty busy time for Pokemon. November 2021, they had released the Pokemon Brilliant Diamond and Shining Pearl remakes. Granted, those were done by, a third-party studio, Ilka. So, it wasn't really as much of a strain on the Pokemon company, but this came out shortly after in January of 2022 with not much time to breathe after that because Pokemon Scarlet and Violet would later come out that fall of 2022. And that was just a lot of ambition for a short period of time from the Pokemon company. And I think we saw that crunch affect all of those games. I think Brilliant Diamond and Shining Pearl is obviously known as a pretty lackluster remake. This game feels very rushed in some ways, and Pokemon Scarlet and Violet on release ran atrociously. And so this is that middle child, that one that was squeezed in the middle of 2 different releases. And I will say, gameplay-wise, there are some things that make this game feel like it was rushed out the door. But first, let's talk about some of the good things. I think the overall gameplay changes they make from the generic, regular Pokemon mainline games, at a glance, are actually pretty good. Yes, you're still using turn-based battles, but they introduced the strong style and the agile style. So basically, the main thing with those is that a strong style move will deal more damage, but will make you slower. An agile style move will make you faster, but will deal less damage. And those have an effect on the turn order. So if you do an agile style move, for example, you might get to move again after that. Or if you do a strong style move, your opponent might get to move again after that. So it does technically change the way the turn-based battles go. And at a glance, it's actually pretty interesting. I think, on first playing it, I really enjoyed the change to the gameplay. After revisiting Pokemon Legends Arceus, I will say the strong and agile styles were kind of frustrating, if only for the fact that no matter how much you calculated the changes in the turn order, there would always be something that messes up that turn order still. Whether it was your opponent's agile and strong style, if you take out an opponent's Pokemon, even if it's supposed to be your turn next, there's a good chance that they will get to go before you. A lot of things that just kind of make some of the gameplay frustrating. When you're experiencing it. I wouldn't say it makes the game unplayable by any means, but that is an interesting yet frustrating part of the game, and I think it gets worse throughout the game. I revisited some of the post-game, and I was kind of feeling some of the strain of that kind of strong style, agile style, kind of that bit of frustration. Whereas instead, Pokemon Legends ZA, they don't do that. They do a totally different style of combat for Pokemon. They do something closer to, it almost reminds me of like a Xenoblade. It's very live, you're using moves with cooldown times, and you're trying to kind of dodge and weave and sub out Pokemon. It's more of a real-time kind of combat. I think there are some pros to having this type of combat. I think it kind of refreshes us as a player to kind of a different style of Pokemon battles. I think at first it kind of feels really freeing, being able to just attack whenever. It feels like what we would always imagine the Pokemon anime to be like. You know, you use your attacks, you know, both people are using their attacks at the same time. You're trying to land them. Whoever lands it first is going to do the damage, maybe knock them out. So it's very real time, very quickly paced, and I think that is a good thing overall. However, I will say that gameplay over time starts to get a little tedious, or a little more boring, but I would still say I appreciate the change in the gameplay that Legends ZA has from the mainline games. Both of these games do have boss battles. I think both of the boss battles in these games kind of are commendable in their own way. First off, Legends Arceus, there aren't as many boss battles, but the boss battles that you do have are pretty meaningful. They're against these enraged Pokemon, and they're all new regional variations of Pokemon, which is really fun. Those battles involve the player as an active part of the battle before you even throw a Pokemon out there. You have to use calming bombs to calm down the enraged Pokemon. You're trying to dodge attacks so you don't die, because that's one thing in both these games that are new, is that you can take damage as the player. And so you can black out, not from running out of Pokemon, but from getting hit by Pokemon, which is also a nice touch. But yeah, so you face off against these bosses. You have to bob and weave, you have to dodge attacks, you have to use those bombs on the Pokemon to calm them down. And then once they're calm, you get to use your Pokemon in the different style of battle like I talked about before, with the agile style and the strong style. So I think those boss battles are actually really fun. The boss battles in Legends ZA are similar in the fact that you are in an enclosed arena. The arenas in Arceus are much better than the arenas in Legends ZA. The arenas are actually part of the landscapes that you visit in Arceus, while the arenas for the boss battles in Legends ZA take you into this essentially parallel dimension where you fight the Pokemon. It's the same place every time you have a boss fight like that. And it's, you know, it's nothing special. It gets the job done, but it's nothing special. The boss fights in Legends ZA, while you're not doing that calming of the enraged Pokemon like you are in Arceus, you still are dodging throughout, because the attacks can hit you and knock you out. So now you, and usually you have a partner with you, the two of you are going to go ahead and fight this enraged Pokemon, usually a Mega Evolved Pokemon, and you have to use your best skills to beat that Pokemon. I'd say it's a pretty fun gameplay formula overall. I would say the bosses are probably one of the better parts of the game, even though it kind of lacks some of the aesthetic of Arceus. I wouldn't say it's necessarily better than Arceus's bosses, but I think a part that does give it an edge is the fact that, like I mentioned, Legends ZA brings back Mega Evolution. Mega Evolution is it's kind of a cheap gimmick, if we're being honest, but it's a really cool cheap gimmick. The fact that Legends ZA, you know, it had been a while since we had seen Mega Evolution. You know, you think back to when we last had Mega Evolution available, you know, they were present in X and Y. That's when they were introduced. We had them in the Gen 3 remakes, Alpha Sapphire and Omega Ruby. You can use them in Sun and Moon, Ultra Sun, Ultra Moon competitively. But since then, we haven't really seen Mega Evolutions, if, you know, you're not counting things like spin-offs or, you know, maybe Pokemon Go had them. So having those Mega Evolutions come back with new Mega Evolutions, mind you, and having those as a playable aspect to your Pokemon team, I think that is a really strong thing that Legends ZA has going for it. And those boss battles is a really good example of that. Fighting against a giant Mega Evolved Pokemon, I would say, is pretty awesome. Is it better than fighting against, you know, the enraged regional variants of Arceus? Ooh, I don't know. They both are kind of equal to me. I think I would say that Pokemon Legends Arceus, the boss battles are a little better. There are less of them. I would hope they're, you know, better. But yeah, I think Legends Arceus has the better boss battles. But I think the gimmick of the Mega Evolution is a good gimmick. Overall, for gameplay, which one would I lean towards? Oh, I don't even know. I think the gameplay, I think I would lean towards Arceus for the gameplay. While I do respect what Pokemon Legends ZA is doing with that new gameplay style, with the more real-time action in the combat, it gets tedious after a while compared to, at least it's still a turn-based battle, so it has its roots in what makes the traditional Pokemon games good. while it adds some new flair and some new variation to those battles. One thing I do want to commend for both of these games, though, is that in both Legends Arceus and Legends ZA, you can catch Pokemon without having to actually engage them in combat. So you get to just throw the Pokeball at the Pokemon. It's a really welcome change to the Pokemon series. I think having to enter into an official battle every time is annoying, let's be honest. I would rather just be able to, it might not always work, but I would at least rather have the opportunity to try to catch it by sneaking up on it. I think it's a nice change of pace. All right, let's talk style. I think Legends Arceus has such a unique style to it that is unlike anything that the Pokemon franchise has had really before this. Going back in time to an ancient region version of Sinnoh, the Hisui region, which is just a really unique idea. You get to go into a lot more natural landscapes, and they're all pretty sprawling landscapes. It's definitely not an open world game. I think this would be more considered an open area or open zone game. But those zones are pretty nice. You know, they're pretty distinct from each other. They all have different, you know, regional styles to them. They're not all just like the typical ones of like, oh, it's water themed or fire themed. No, they actually kind of go a little further than that. Like the one that would be considered the fire area, there is a volcano, but you know, it's kind of like, almost feels like this nice island archipelago. It's very, you know, unique, very distinct. It has this nice like swampy area. You know, you have the chilled mountains, and having these open zones, it feels really nice getting to visit, you know, different parts of the game. What's not really nice is the fact that anytime I want to switch between zones, I have to go back to Jubilife Village first, and that gets old. I wish I could just travel from zone to another zone, but it just won't let me. It's like it doesn't trust me to do so. But style-wise, I mean, Legends Arceus has such a distinct style. The fact that it takes place in the past, the style and design of all the villages, the design of things like your Pokedex is more like an ancient scroll compared to like the technological advances of, you know, a modern Pokedex. The Pokeballs are really cool because they feel like they are more of contraptions that somehow work. And it's actually really charming when you use a Pokeball to catch a Pokemon. If you catch it, it shoots up a little firework to let you know that you caught it. And I think that is really charming. I think what also helps Arceus is the fact that it takes place in this ancient civilization. The legendary Pokemon, they feel more at home in a game like Legends Arceus compared to, you know, other games even where they're more modern cities. The fact that, you know, you have to go to this cave that is just part of the natural terrain, like most of the things in this game, to find a Pokemon like Regigigas, right? It's really fun and really, really cool to actually see a Pokemon in its natural habitat and feel like you're visiting it in its natural habitat. Legends EA, I think in terms of style, kind of disappointed me. We had Legends Arceus, which had this, you know, like I said, this very unique style, whereas Legends EA, in terms of its setting, the whole game takes place in Lumiose City. And so you really don't get much in terms of variety of settings you visit, much variety in the game overall. Yeah, sometimes you know, you go to a sewer at one point, or you go to, you know, you get to traverse on, you know, rooftops with, you know, parkour, which the parkour is nothing special in this game. And it just feels very samey. I think they do a decent job making each part of the city feel relatively unique, especially with the wild zones. And it's cool, it's novel, getting to see those wild zones inside the city, just having wild Pokemon catchable in these little zones where you are just in the city. I think that part is charming, but I think style-wise, it feels like it's very limited. I feel like even if your base was still Lumiose City, but you could go out to different areas like you could in Arceus, I think that would have gone a long way. You know, this is just taking place in the modern day, so it's just like the same style of any other Pokemon. You know, it takes place in, you know, like I said, Lumiose. Lumiose City is based on Paris, so it feels very Paris-inspired, and it's cool, but like I said, it just gets old. So I think style-wise, I have to give it to Arceus too. I want to talk about performance, though. The performance and how these games run is interesting. Granted, I'm using the Switch 2 version of Legends EA. I'm not really talking about the Switch 1 version. This game is optimized for Switch 2 more so than Switch 1. And I'm also talking about Arceus now playing on a Switch 2. It helps out that game's problems a little bit. So I'm giving both these games the best chance they can have, you know, in terms of how they run. Legends EA, I mean, it runs buttery smooth. I didn't notice any dips in frame rate, anything in terms of troubling with the performance. Overall, the game just runs really well. It runs really smoothly, and I think it has enough leg room. I don't think this was too crazy of a game graphically or too crazy of a game design-wise that it would necessarily be something pushing the Switch 2 to its limits. I think there was enough space in this game's design to let the game run well and flourish while not necessarily pushing the hardware to its limits. Like I said, Legends Arceus was in that time where there seemed to be like some crunch going on at the Pokemon Company. This was that middle child being released within a year of 2 other Pokemon games. Like I said, yeah, ILCA developed the remakes of the Gen 4 games, but still, there are some times where you can see the performance. Even running on the Switch 2, the frame rate will freeze for a moment. Everything just looks very jagged. There's not a lot of polish in this game, so in terms of that, I think the art style is actually doing a lot to carry this game, because in terms of actual graphic fidelity, this game sucks. It looks bad. Another thing to point out, like I mentioned, you can't go from open zone to open zone in this game, which is just annoying. But every time you go from an open zone back to Jubilife Village, your home base, you get this loading screen, and then it just very abruptly disappears and you're there in the village. It feels like there should have been a fade in, there should have been a transition. Nope, it just like appears, and it feels very weird. And it feels like some of the design in the game feels like this game was rushed. Yeah, you have some waypoints in the open areas, but even like in some of the end game areas, there are not waypoints close enough to the end game area, so you have to go to a nearby travel point to then go to this cave, which this cave connects to the top of a mountain instead of being able to climb a mountain. And so that kind of shows some limitations in what they were doing with the game. It just feels like some of this game, it needed more time, it needed more optimization, because this game on the original Switch was looking rough. Like I said, I'm giving it the benefit of the doubt of some of the Switch 2's extra horsepower, but even then, I'm still seeing things with the frame rate. I'm still seeing, the graphics are still not great. It's not gonna up-res it, and it runs poorly. I wouldn't say it runs as bad as Pokemon Scarlet and Violet when they first released on the Nintendo Switch 1. I don't think this game ran as bad as those games on the Switch 1 either. But the thing is now, those games have gotten Switch 2 updates, so you can run those games perfectly fine. I'm kind of confused why Legends Arceus never got a Switch 2 update to let that run a little better, or to give it just a fresh coat of paint. Give it something, please, man. Because going back to this game, it still looks rough, and it still plays kind of rough. While, like I said, Legends ZA is buttery smooth. So in terms of performance, I'm gonna have to give it to Legends ZA. Like I said, yeah, it's a Nintendo Switch 2 edition. It should be better, but they could have updated this game like they did Scarlet and Violet, so there's really no good excuse why this game runs the way it does still. I do want to touch base on one thing. Each of these games and their gimmicks. Like I said, the gimmick of Legends ZA is that return of Mega Evolved Pokemon, and it is a welcome return, really. The fact that they added more Pokemon into the base game of Legends ZA that could Mega Evolve, I think it was a big deal. It was a really nice addition to the game. I remember, before this game officially released, there was a leak showing all the new Mega Evolved Pokemon, and it was just really exciting seeing those new Pokemon. Yeah, they would tease some of them. Like, I remember they had a trailer for Mega Victory Bell, which looked weird, and they would kind of tease some of those Pokemon throughout. But having Mega Evolved Pokemon back is a really nice gimmick. I think it is charming enough. I think it gets you in enough, especially since you get to play with the Mega Evolved Pokemon in this new way, in this more live, this more real-time combat compared to the traditional Pokemon games that Mega Evolution was in before. Legends Arceus, I wouldn't say necessarily has a gimmick, but the closest equivalent that there would be to the Mega Evolution would be the regional variations of Pokemon and the new evolutions of Pokemon in certain Pokemon evolution lines. I think the fact that this game is based in the past and all of those new types of Pokemon are influenced by the terrain and where they are, I think it's really cool. It's really nice that all the boss fights in Arceus, in terms of those specific boss fights in the arenas, are against a regional variation Pokemon. So, you go against a regional variation of, a new evolution for Scyther. But there are some really cool regional variations of Pokemon, and they all feel more catered to the art style and design of Legends Arceus. You have Pokemon like Sneasler, which is a different take on Sneasel and Weavile. New versions of Growlithe and Arcanine that change your typing and make them feel more fitting into this ancient style of gameplay, this ancient Japan style. Even changed Voltorb and Electrode to look like the old style Pokeballs instead of the new style Pokeballs they look like in newer games, which is such a weird thing in terms of the in-game lore, how that would even make sense, but it's charming. So it has all these regional variations, which are nice. And I would say one thing that's a gimmick is that you get to traverse on the backs of Pokemon, unlike Legends EA. So you get to ride on, you know, the regional variation of Ursaring's evolution, Ursaluna. You get to, you know, be carried by a Sneasler up on the mountains. You get to ride Stantler's new evolution. You get to fly with Braviary's new regional form. A lot of really cool things they did with that. Whereas in Legends EA, you're just running around. You're not riding any Pokemon. Again, you're just in the city, you know, so that gimmick, eh. One weird thing that Arceus has over Legends EA is the fact that in any open area, I can just call out all 6 of my Pokemon that I have on my team and have them all out at the same time. Legends EA only does that if you sit on a bench and relax there and all your Pokemon kind of just go out of their Pokeballs near you. It's cool, you know, very small nitpicks, but it's definitely not as freeing. So yeah, so gameplay and style I gave to Arceus. Performance I gave to Legends EA. I think I would give the gimmicks to Legends EA as well. So, you know, 2 points each. How should we break this tie? I think we should talk about what these games' legacies are going to be. Which one of these games do I think is going to hold up for the long term in terms of memorability, in terms of being able to revisit it and replay it? Overall, out of these 2 games, I think Arceus is going to be more worthwhile to go back to in like 5 years. I think the art design and the style of Arceus just makes it a much more enthralling adventure. Legends EA, it feels very limited in its scope. Being limited to the one city. Even, you know, the title, the Legends, you know, ZA, it's all about this battle royale they take part in, and you're supposed to rank up from the letter Z to all the way to the letter A. It even felt like the game itself, and the designers kind of got sick of that. And they had you start skipping around letters and not actually going through that process the whole time. So it kind of just feels, you know, a little more meaningless. Yeah, the finale is, you know, pretty grand, but so is Arceus. Arceus has some pretty big moments in it that feel like, whoa, like this is intense. So while yes, Legends EA runs better, yes, it has better gimmicks attached to it, I think overall legacy and memorability, I think it's gonna go to Arceus. I think I'd rather go back to play Arceus over Legends EA because of that unique feeling that game has. The fact that it's such a different take on, you know, open exploration in the Pokemon world, and we're visiting a different Pokemon world from what we're used to entirely. So I think that final score is going to be 3-2. I think Legends Arceus is taking the win here. I will say, to be fair, I do think both these games are just 7 out of 10s. So, you know, they're both fighting in their weight class. But just because a game is a 7 out of 10 doesn't mean I don't think it's worth visiting. I grew up with Pokemon games, and I never really look forward to many Pokemon games these days. But I always end up buying the new one still and blazing through it just because I'm a sucker for this company. So thank you, Nintendo, for giving me 2 okay games.